A miracle of the Virgin Mary happened in an unlikely place, a chemistry laboratory in Boston. A professor who mocked a student for talking about the Virgin Mary discovered that there are forces in the universe no formula can predict, but that can break even the hardest heart. But before we continue, leave a comment saying where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I'd love to see how far the miracles of the Virgin Mary are reaching. Professor Robert Chen, 48 years old, 20 years teaching chemistry in Boston. You know that kind of professor who walks into the classroom and everyone automatically sits up straighter. The one who makes you check your notes 3 times before raising your hand. That was him. But there was something else, a coldness that went beyond professionalism, as if he had built a wall between himself and the rest of the world. Brick by brick, silence by silence. Robert's routine was precise. He woke up at 6. Black coffee, no sugar. At the lab by 7:30, always the first one there. His classes were flawless. His students learned, but no one stayed after class to talk. No one asked personal questions, and Robert preferred it that way. At night, he went back to his apartment, heated something in the microwave, graded papers late into the night, slept poorly, woke up at 6. Repeated everything. A machine. Functional. Efficient. Alone. What no one knew, what he never told anyone, was about that Sunday morning, 5 years ago. Catherine, his wife, 42 years old, literature teacher. She had that way of making any place feel more alive. Laughed too loud at restaurants, sang off-key in the shower, made pancakes on Sundays. That March morning, she was heading out to church, like every Sunday. "Come with me today," she asked from the door. Robert was on the couch with a book open on his lap. "I have to finish this reading." "You always have to finish something." It wasn't anger, it was exhaustion, from asking, from hearing no. "I'll go next time, I promise." Catherine stood in the doorway. That pause when you feel someone wants to say something important, but gives up. "I love you, Robert." "Love you too." He didn't even look up when the door closed. The call came 56 minutes later. "Mr. Chen, this is the hospital. You need to come immediately. Your wife has been in an accident." Ural, Robert remembers every second of that drive. His hands gripping the wheel, his heart beating so fast it hurt in his chest, the traffic lights that seemed to take an eternity. When he arrived, a young doctor, one compassionate yet professional face, that practiced expression of someone who delivers bad news every day, led him to a small room. "We did everything we could, Mr. Chen. The impact was very severe." Robert stood still, processing, as if his brain refused to accept the information. "Can I see her?" They took him to her. Robert held her hand, and something inside him broke. In the following days came the funeral, the endless paperwork, the countless condolences. "She's in a better place now. God had a plan. You need to have faith." Robert listened to it all, thanked them, shook hands, accepted hugs, and inside, a cold anger began to solidify. What plan? What kind of God takes a 42-year-old woman 5 blocks away from the church she loved so much? If prayer worked, Catherine would be alive. She prayed every week. She truly believed. She had genuine faith. And where was that God when the car ran the light? Robert stopped believing that day. He went back to work 3 weeks later. Everyone offered condolences. They told him to take more time if he needed, but Robert didn't want time. Time meant being alone with his thoughts. Time meant remembering. Work was better. 5 years went by like that. Each day the same as the one before. Each week a repetition of the last. Co-workers stopped asking how he was doing. Friends gave up inviting him out. Life kept moving around him while Robert stayed still. Frozen in that Sunday morning. In that next time I'll go that never had a next time. Until that Tuesday in October. It was an ordinary class. Second-year students. 43 of them taking notes while Robert explained reaction mechanisms on the whiteboard. The marker squeaked against the surface. The strong smell of ink filled the lab. Robert was in the middle of explaining when he heard it. Third row, left side. A whisper. But she prayed to the Virgin Mary and got completely better. The marker froze in midair. Robert turned slowly. That kind of silence where you can hear the hum of the fluorescent lights, where everyone holds their breath. "Miss Rodriguez." Emma froze. "Yes, Professor." Robert took off his glasses, cleaned the lenses with his shirt, put them back on, slowly, deliberately. "Since my lecture apparently isn't as interesting as your conversation, perhaps you'd like to share it with the rest of us." The other students looked down. They knew that tone. They knew what came next. Emma turned red. I'm sorry, Professor." No, please. Share. I'm genuinely curious about what's so important that it can't wait until the break. Have you ever seen someone wish they could disappear, sink through the floor? Emma was like that. My aunt was really sick. She did a novena to the Virgin Mary, and then she got better. Robert crossed his arms, leaned against the desk, that half smile. Got better. How interesting. And convenient. Professor, I wasn't trying to... Let me see if I understand the sequence of events. He started pacing across the room, slow, measured steps. Your aunt was sick. She prayed, and then she got better. And you attribute that recovery to prayer? She believes so. She believes. Robert stopped. And the doctors, the treatment, the medication, the body's own ability to heal itself, none of that counts? Emma's eyes were filling with tears now. I just know she was really sick, and now she's fine. Of course she's fine. Because sometimes bodies recover, Miss Rodriguez. It's basic biology, not because someone up there decided to make a special exception for your family. The whole room was holding its breath. You could feel the discomfort in the air. If prayer really worked, Robert stopped. He knew he shouldn't continue, but that old anger, that pain he thought he had under control, was rising in his throat. If prayer worked, my wife would still be alive. His voice was steady, calm even, but something underneath was broken. She prayed every single Sunday. She was the kindest person I've ever known, truly believed in all of it, and she's not here. So forgive me if I don't share your enthusiasm for imaginary miracles. Emma was crying openly now, tears streaming down her face as she tried to compose herself. Robert saw it, realized what he had done, but he couldn't stop. Your aunt got better because she was lucky, because her body responded well to treatment, not because someone whispered magic words into the air. He turned back to the board, picked up the marker. Now, if you don't mind, let's get back to class, to real science. So, as I was saying, but no one was listening anymore. The students stared down at their notes, at the floor, at anything except the professor or Emma. The class ended in total awkwardness. When Robert dismissed the group 40 minutes later, they hurried out, whispering to each other, looking back. Emma was the last to leave. She stopped near the door for a second, as if she were about to say something. But she only clutched her backpack against her chest and walked out. Robert was left alone in the lab. He erased the board, the blue marks vanishing beneath the eraser. He knew what he had done. He knew he had crossed a line, but in that moment he couldn't bring himself to care. What Robert didn't know was that every word of mockery had been heard, and that very night his entire life was about to change. Because when you challenge heaven publicly, sometimes heaven responds in a very personal way. 7 p.m. The apartment was as silent as it always was. Robert opened the door, and the silence hit him like a wall. 5 years, and he still wasn't used to it. That moment of opening the door expecting to hear, "Hi, love, how was your day?" and hearing only nothing. He walked to the kitchen, opened the fridge. The yellowish light revealed the same containers as always, frozen food, leftovers. A bottle of milk, probably, at its limit. He closed it without taking anything, It wasn't hunger. He tried turning on the TV just to have some noise, but the voices of the hosts sounded like they were coming from another planet. He turned it off. Have you ever had that feeling of being inside your own life, but completely disconnected? Like you're watching everything happen to you from far away, through thick glass? That was how Robert had felt every night for 5 years, 8 o'clock. He was sitting on the couch staring at the wall when he realized he'd made coffee without remembering making it. The cup sat on the coffee table, still steaming. The scene from class wouldn't leave his mind. Emma crying. The whole room silent. The words he had said. What kind of man does that? He murmured to the empty apartment. 9 o'clock dragged itself in. Robert was in the bedroom now, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the photo of Catherine on the nightstand. She was laughing in that picture, that smile that always found light even on the grayest days. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "You would be so disappointed in me today." Robert closed his eyes, felt the weight of everything, the old anger that never went away, the constant loneliness, the fresh shame of what he'd done to Emma. And then something changed in the air. It was subtle at first, a warmth that didn't come from the heater. Different, as if the air itself were becoming thicker, more present. Robert opened his eyes slowly. The room was exactly the same as before. Same dim light from the lamp, same neatly made bed, same photo. Then came the scent. Roses. It wasn't imagination. It was the real fragrance of fresh roses, as if someone had just brought in a huge bouquet and placed it there in the room. But there were no flowers. There never were. Robert's heart began to race. He stood up slowly, every muscle tense, looked around the small room, everything in its place. Nothing out of order, but that presence, that absolute certainty that he was no longer alone. "This is exhaustion," he said aloud. But his own voice sounded weak, not convincing, not even to himself. "You're tired. It's been a hard day. It's just—" The scent grew stronger, and then Robert saw her. It wasn't gradual. It wasn't a shadow-forming shape. It was instant. A woman stood in the corner of the room, between the dresser and the window. In a space Robert knew had been empty 3 seconds ago. She wore a deep blue mantle, the kind of blue you see in the sky when the sun is just about to set. A white dress beneath it, so pure it seemed to glow with its own light. But it was the face that made Robert forget to breathe. The eyes, deep brown, but with a compassion so intense that Robert felt as though every wound, every pain, every moment of despair in his life was being seen, understood, and loved. It was the gaze of a mother who had lost a child, a mother who understands. He tried to speak. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He tried to move, to take a step back, forward, anything, but his feet were glued to the floor. It wasn't fear. It was something far greater than fear. It was recognition. As if some part of him, a part he thought had died along with Catherine, was awakening after a sleep far too long. She took a step forward, a soft, silent movement. "Robert? My dear son, you never lost faith. You only buried it beneath your anger so you wouldn't feel the pain. You need to forgive yourself. And you are not alone." Robert completely broke down. He fell to his knees on the cold floor, and 5 years of repressed pain came out in sobs that echoed through the empty room. He cried for the morning Catherine left. He cried for every time he said, "Next time I'll go," and never did. He cried for the empty apartment he returned to every night. He cried for the years of solitude he had chosen as punishment. He cried for Emma, and for all the others whose faith he had tried to destroy because his own had died. He cried for everything, and as he wept, he felt a hand on his shoulder. The touch was real, physical, warm, gentle, but firm. When he finally managed to lift his eyes, she was gone. The room was ordinary, normal temperature, dim light from the bedside lamp, silence, as if nothing had happened, but something had happened. Robert knew it. He felt it. He stayed there on his knees. He didn't know for how long. Legs numb, face wet with tears, chest aching, but aching in a different way. The way it hurts when something broken begins to come back together again. Finally, he managed to stand, stumbled to the bed, sat down, looked at Catherine's photo. "She came?" he whispered. "The Virgin Mary came?" And for the first time in years, when Robert looked at that smiling face in the picture, he didn't feel only pain. He felt gratitude for having had her, for having loved, for having been loved. And more importantly, he felt that maybe, just maybe, there was still something left to live for, not just to exist, to truly live. Robert didn't sleep that night. How could he? He sat on the edge of the bed until the clock struck 6. Time to get up. But he had been awake for hours. Part of him tried to rationalize. Hallucination, exhaustion, but another part, a deeper, truer part, knew. It was real. At 7:15, he took a shower, hot water running down his tense back, trying to organize his thoughts, decide what to do, because he had to do something. Emma. She deserved an apology, a real one. Not those hollow corporate apologies people give when they're forced to, but a genuine request for forgiveness. At 8 o'clock, Robert was already on campus. Too early. His first class wasn't until 10, but he couldn't stay home. The apartment suddenly felt too small. At 9, office hours. Usually no one showed up. But today, at 9:05, there was a knock on the door. Professor Chen? Robert lifted his head from the papers he was pretending to read. A student from yesterday's class. "Jessica." "Come in." Jessica stepped in, but stayed near the door, ready to run if she had to. Robert recognized the posture. Students always acted that way around him. "I just wanted to talk about Emma." Robert felt his chest tighten. "I know. I need to talk to her, too." "Is she coming today?" "I don't know. She was thinking about dropping the class." The tightness grew stronger. "Because of me." Jessica didn't answer directly, but she didn't deny it either. "Emma, she went through a lot last year, lost her younger brother, and her aunt was very sick too. When her aunt got better, it was like the only good thing that happened to their family in a long time. And when you said that thing," she stopped, didn't need to finish. Robert closed his eyes. "I didn't know. I know you didn't, but it still hurt her. Could you ask her to come talk to me during my office hours or after class? Whenever works best for her?" Jessica hesitated. "I'll talk to her." "Thank you. And Jessica, thanks for coming to tell me." She nodded and left. Robert stared at the empty doorway for a long time. 10 o'clock. Robert walked into the classroom and saw that Emma wasn't there. Her seat in the 3rd row, empty. He gave the lecture. Talked about reactions, explained mechanisms, answered questions, but he was on autopilot, his mind somewhere else. When class ended at 11, he went back to his office. Sat, waited, 11:30, nothing. Noon, nothing. 12:15, a knock on the door. "Professor Chen?" "Emma." Robert stood up so fast he knocked a pen off the desk. "Emma, thank you for coming. Please sit." She walked in slowly, sat in the chair across from his desk, but kept her backpack on her lap. "Emma, Robert paused, took a breath. "I need to apologize. Truly, what I did yesterday was unforgivable." Emma looked down. "I took out on you something that had nothing to do with you, and it was cruel, and it was wrong, and I'm so sorry." A long pause. "Jessica told me about your brother," Robert continued, his voice lower, "and I understand, more than you might think." Emma looked up for the first time. "My wife passed away 5 years ago," Robert said. "She was on her way to church. Car accident, and I was so angry at God, at the universe, at everything." He stopped, swallowed hard. "But that doesn't give me the right to mock your faith, your hope. What helped you get through the worst moment of your life?" Emma stayed silent. "You don't have to accept my apology," Robert said. "But I needed you to know that I am genuinely sorry. And if you decide to come back to class, I promise nothing like that will ever happen again." Silence for a few more seconds. Then Emma spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "My brother was 8 when he passed. The doctors said he had more time, but he didn't. And yes, we prayed every day, the whole family, and he still passed away." Her voice trembled now. "And for a while I was really angry too. What's the point of praying if it doesn't work? What's the point of having faith?" She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "But you know what helped me? Believing that he's okay now, that I'll see him again someday. Maybe it's just, I don't know, maybe it's just a way to cope. But it works for me." "It's not just a way to cope," Robert said, and he meant it. "It's brave, choosing hope when it would be easier to choose anger." Emma gave a small smile, the first since she'd arrived. "I accept your apology, Professor. And thank you for sharing about your wife. That must have been hard." Emma adjusted her backpack. "I'll be back in class tomorrow." "I'm glad. And Emma, thank you for coming, for giving me a second chance." Robert sat in the empty office, staring at the door, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. That night, Robert did something he hadn't done in years. He went to the drawer of the bedside table, opened it. Inside, wrapped in an old handkerchief, was Catherine's rosary, dark wooden beads, a simple metal crucifix. She used to pray with it every night before going to sleep. Robert picked it up carefully. The beads were smooth, worn from years of use. He sat on the edge of the bed. He didn't know if he could pray, couldn't quite remember the words. It had been so long. He started simply. "I don't know if you're listening. I don't know how this works, but—" He stopped, took a breath. "Thank you for last night, for not giving up on me, even when I gave up on everything." He held the rosary with both hands. Robert stayed there, just holding it, letting the tears fall. He placed the rosary on the nightstand, next to Catherine's photo. And that night, for the first time in 5 years, Robert slept through the whole night. No nightmares, no waking up at 3 in the morning with his chest tight, no heaviness that made even breathing hard. Just peace. A miracle is not only the impossible becoming real. It is the closed heart that opens. It is hope returning where there was only despair. It is faith reborn. Robert Chen was perhaps the most unlikely man to receive a heavenly visit. A skeptic, bitter. But that was exactly why she chose him. Because if the miracle of the Virgin Mary could happen to him, it can happen to anyone. It can happen to you. And look, if you made it this far, to the end of Robert and Emma's story, do one thing for me. Write forgiveness in the comments, because sometimes that's what we all need to learn. To forgive others, but most of all, to forgive ourselves. I want to see how many hearts this story truly touched. And every time I read Catherine in the comments, I'll know that one more person believes that the miracles of the Virgin Mary still happen. And you, do you believe in the miracles of the Virgin Mary? Write in the comments. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Share this video with someone who needs to renew their hope today. May the Virgin Mary continue to bless and protect you and your family. Amen.